Hello, I'm Dave Toro Shields, and I'm coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana, and Kenosis Counseling Center. I want to talk to you tonight about depression and anxiety. Did you know that approximately 45% of folks who have depression will also have an anxiety disorder, and vice versa? And so I want to talk to you tonight a little bit about depression and a little bit about anxiety. I want to talk with you about how you'll know if you have depression and how you'll know if you have anxiety, and a little bit about both of those. First, depression. You'll know if you have depression if if you have depression, if you have low energy. Folks who struggle with depression have chronic fatigue. They feel sluggish. They have difficulty concentrating. They struggle with making decisions. They have a lowered ability to recall information and memory problems. They have physical pain, aches and cramps, gastrointestinal problems. Sometimes folks with clinical depression will go to a doctor and get diagnosed with things like gastrointestinal problems, IBS, and things along those lines. It's interesting that sometimes when folks finally get treated for their clinical depression, their IBS symptoms go away. Depression folks have changes in appetite and weight, up or down. They have difficulty in sleeping. They'll wake early or they'll oversleep. They really never have any restful sleep, or they have rare restful sleep. So they'll sleep sometimes through the night, but then wake up feeling like they haven't gotten any sleep at all. They'll have loss of interest in activities. A decreased level of pleasure in activities that they used to have pleasure in. They'll have a loss of interest in those same activities, and they'll have persistent feelings of sadness, anxiety, or emptiness. They'll often feel hopeless and pessimistic. They will be irritable around folks that they care about. And they'll feel restless. That restlessness will be an urge to move when they don't or aren't supposed to be moving. This happens in bed at night as well, and can be a real issue. They often feel guilty and experience feelings of worthlessness and helplessness. These folks often have thoughts of death or suicide, and can often also have suicide attempts. And so I know that in my darkest days of depression, when I was struggling with clinical depression, that a lot of those symptoms really did sound like me. And so if you have depression, many of those symptoms may sound like you. I am going to post on Facebook and on YouTube a link to a depression test for those of you who, listening to my symptoms recital today, may still want to take a test to see if you do in fact have depression or clinical depression, especially for those of you who haven't been to see a doctor or a therapist so far. So on to anxiety. Folks who have anxiety are easily fatigued. They have difficulty concentrating or recalling events, especially in short-term memory. They may walk out of one room and into another and not remember something that somebody said to them just moments ago. They have muscle tension. This is a big deal for anxiety sufferers. They will have a great difficulty in feeling often cramps or muscle tension in their neck, chest, and shoulder areas. It's interesting that when we work with anxiety clients in the therapy room, we will often encourage them to get massage. Massage can often really help with the tension that they feel in their bodies, but it's also interesting, research has shown that the massage also helps in reduction of obsessive thinking as well. So that's really kind of interesting. Someone with anxiety will also have oftentimes a racing heart. They will grind their teeth. They will also have sleep problems, especially when they try to fall asleep. They will feel restless in bed and unrestful. They will also wake up in the morning and feel like they haven't rested well. Anxiety folks can also be irritable, and especially to the folks that they love and that are around them most frequently. They can have excessive worrying and thoughts that just won't go away, obsessive thinking, and ruminating around issues. This can be severe and intrusive, and it gets in the way of accomplishing daily tasks. These intrusive thoughts absolutely get in the way of accomplishing daily activities, and that can be very frustrating to the anxious person who's accustomed to being able to function on a daily basis and often cannot function when they have this type of anxiety. They can't complete tasks. They have a rapid heartbeat. They sweat. They shake, and oftentimes have a dry mouth. Other issues that anxiety sufferers can experience are panic attacks, which include intense and overwhelming sensations of fear, often debilitating the anxious person in the moment, and can result in them feeling in the moment like they're going to die, or that they're going to be sucked into nothingness. It's hard to describe, even though I've listened to anxiety folks just try to describe it over many years. It's very difficult for them to describe in the moment. Anxiety sufferers, especially on the social side, can avoid social situations for being worried that they might be judged or scrutinized by others. They're fearful of being embarrassed and humiliated. They know that their fears are irrational, and but they can't seem to get over that. Even though they know their fears are irrational, they have specific fears of specific things like going outside, or specific fears of bugs, or specific fears of showers or water, specific fears of flying, specific fears of being in a crowd. We call these phobias, and they can definitely take over a person's thoughts and debilitate them in the moment, so that they can take no action in their struggle. So that is a description of the anxious person, somebody who has clinical anxiety or an anxiety disorder. So if you're somebody who struggles with these issues and also struggles with the depressive symptoms that I described earlier, you may in fact have a dual diagnosis of both depression and anxiety, an anxiety disorder. And if you're still on the fence, I'm going to post a link below the Facebook post here, and also on YouTube for you to go check it out, a self-test that you can take online. If you haven't been diagnosed or would like more information, the best thing to do is to get in front of a psychiatrist and to get in front of a psychotherapist, so that you can be properly diagnosed and that you get the help that you need. We know one caveat to that is that psychiatrists and psychotherapists can be single-minded sometimes, and so if you're resonating with the symptoms of both of these problems that I've discussed here tonight, it's important when you go for help, or if you're already in treatment somewhere, it's important for you to make it clear to the person that's helping you that you struggle with both depression and anxiety. I have a brother who struggles with both these issues, and I just had to coach him to make sure that he talked clearly with his psychiatrist and with his psychotherapist that he has both problems going on and that he needs treated for both. Because his psychiatrist and his therapist was only focusing on the depression and not on the anxiety, and so he was still struggling quite a bit. And so it's important that you talk with your psychiatrist and your therapist about both issues. So what to do? It's important. It's important to start where you're at. And one thing that you can do is hold on for just a second while I set my timer here on the video. It's important to start right where you're at. I think sometimes when folks think about getting better, they think in two ways. One is they can't get going. They've got no traction, and and it seems way too overwhelming to get moving, and so they don't take any action at all. I think the other thing that folks do is they set up a way of getting better that's absolutely not possible. It's just too much, and I've done both. I've sat and obsessed about my problems and not taken any action due to my level of hopelessness and despair. And I've also said, okay, I'm going to pull myself up by the bootstraps and I'm going to have a great day. And if you're that kind of person, you've probably already tried this. You probably decided, I'm going to get up early tomorrow. I'm going to get in the shower, which I haven't done for several days. I'm going to get out of the shower and I'm going to clean the house. I'm going to put together a grocery list. I'm going to go grocery shopping. And then I'm going to cook a big dinner for my family this evening. And I'm just going to do it. And you realize when you wake up in the morning that you've overslept again. And that you can't hardly get out of bed. And you realize in that moment that you just can't do it. And so you fall back into bed after being up in a seated position on the side of the bed and realize that you're just a loser, that you can't do it, and that you just you knew better than that. And so the shame attack starts and the guilt starts, and you're a little bit worse than you was the day before. And so that is setting yourself up for failure. When you're clinically depressed and you clinically have an anxiety disorder, you need to start where you're at. This is a disease. You didn't do anything to get it. You're not at fault for having it. It's just a disease. You wouldn't be at fault for having cancer or the flu, and you're just responsible for doing what it takes to get better. And so let's start there, and let's start with something simple. But one of the things I like to do is talk a little bit about the power that depression and anxiety has had in your life. And so one of the first things I want to ask you is, what percentage of your average day does depression and anxiety own? What percentage of your day is depression and anxiety in charge? Think about that for a moment, and just roll with that take a few moments and think about it. Is it 60% in charge of your day? Is it 70% in charge of your day? When I asked myself that question back in 2011, I was right up around 95, 98% of my day. But there was a time late in the evening after my wife would go to bed when I would hit a little bit of a zone. And in that zone, I felt like I was at my best for the whole day in a couple-hour period. And so depression and anxiety had me, except for those couple of hours. And in those couple of hours, I felt like I was in control for that time period. And so depression and anxiety had me for 95% of my day, maybe even 97% of my day. But for a couple of hours, I was in control. And so take your time, think it through, and ask yourself the same question that I asked myself. And this is a question that I asked probably 1,000 clients over the course of 30 years as well. It's an important question. It's a great way to start where you're at. And so now that you've had a moment to think about that, let's talk about what to do. One of the things to do is say, okay, if depression has me for 95% of the day, let's talk about the 5% where you're in control. And so when I asked myself that question, I said, okay, I was 5% of my day, I was in charge. And so what qualities did I have that allowed me to be in charge for 2 hours of the day, for 5% of the day? And identify those qualities that you must have possessed to be able to be in charge for that amount of your day. And so in thinking about that, I had some access to inner peace. I had some access to stubbornness. I had some access to hobbies like reading, and being able to concentrate for those couple of hours like I was unable to do all day long prior to that time. And so then the next question is, once you identify the qualities that you possessed in that time frame, the next question is, how can you put those qualities to use for you the next day with the goal of reclaiming 1 to 2% of your day back from depression and anxiety. What is a small goal that you can claim back in 1 to 2% of your day tomorrow? And a lot of folks initially will say, well, that's nothing. 1 to 2% is ridiculous. I would have claimed more than that. And so it's important to understand and respect the power that the depression and anxiety has in your life. And when you don't respect how powerful it is, it's like not respecting cancer. Cancer is a very powerful disease, and it will take you down. When you try to overdo it during chemotherapy, it will absolutely lay you on your back. And so when you try to overdo it in recovery from depression and anxiety, it will lay you on your back. And so you have to respect the fact that it's got 95% or whatever percentage that you decided that it was in control. That you have to respect that it has that much control. And the other side of this is that if you take 2% of your day back in the next week, that's 14% of your life back in a week's time. If you take 1 to 2% back a day for a week, that's 14%. And if you multiply that by a month, that's 14% in 4 weeks. That's like around 50%. If I've got that right, it's around 50% for a month. And so in a couple of months, 2 to 3 months, you could have your whole life back. And that would be absolutely amazing based on where you're at right now and based on how long you've been suffering. And so this is definitely a powerful intervention in your life. And so what are some small things that you could do? You could shower. You could make your bed. You could call a friend that you've been avoiding and that you've been isolating against, not against, but you've been isolating and not talking to friends that you know love you. And so you could make a call and reach out. You could go on a short walk outside. If it's not winter there, I know right now it's winter here, and it may be too cold for that. But you could go to a mall and walk for 15 minutes. You could try to eat healthier for one meal in a given day. Sorry about that. You could do a lot of things. You could journal about what you're doing, what you plan to do. And you could also journal about the story of depression and anxiety and how it started and how it got a foothold and how it began to take over little by little more and more of your life and what you plan to do incrementally to take your life back. This is a very powerful intervention, and it will work. You want to journal and take advantage of the little bit of time that you have when you're in control of your day to strategize and plan in those little ways how you're going to take back your life. And so if you've gotten something from this video today, please write a comment below or message me on Facebook and let me know. If you felt like something was left out, and that you'd like something more, please be specific and message me on Facebook or leave me a comment on YouTube, and I'll be glad to help. And so now I'll wrap up with a little picture of our website. And you can find us there at Kenosis Counseling Center. We're here to help. We can do phone counseling, video counseling, and also live counseling if you're here in Indianapolis or close by. And so God bless you, and I hope that you get well from depression and anxiety. If you haven't been to a counselor, it helps. If you haven't been to a psychiatrist, medication can also help. And so God bless and take care.